What's up? So this Japanese art stuff, I don't know if you've heard, but it's some pretty good stuff. The weird thing though is that it's very easy to get very pedantic over this stuff, and not for no reason. Do you call this anime style? I'm reading a manga right now though, or what's called a manga. Manga is a Japanese comic book, basically. So do you call this manga art style? But this is based off of a show, Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is an anime. That's what, they call Japanese animated TV shows and movies. So is it an anime style? Is it a manga style? Is it just Japanese pop art style? It's illustrated by Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. We could just call it his art style, except he borrows a lot of artistic shorthands and tropes that are reflected in the rest of the media in Japan. It's very interesting. You see how pedantic these things can get? You could just get lost in trails of thought regarding what it's called. I've heard it called super flat art, but apparently that's just a subsection of Japanese pop art. So who knows? But because of its unique art style, I guess this kind of thing has gotten really popular in the United States. A lot of people watching the Japanese anime as of late, getting very interested in stuff and finding a lot of oddities about the genre that are not reflected in most other forms of media. Even media within Japan itself doesn't reflect a lot of what's going on inside anime. So because of the uniqueness of this sort of thing, it can become difficult to form a solid theoretical framework in which to discuss it, and this is why fans tend to get very pedantic over these sorts of things. Is it this? Is it that? Is it some other thing entirely? I don't know. Nobody does. So I'm surfing online looking for videos that discuss this sort of media, and I find a video by Miles Memory called, That. The video basically asks why the Japanese animated shows Neon Genesis Evangelion and Madoka Magica seem to have stories and themes that give a general warning concerning the abuse of the bodies of women and girls in particular, while at the same time objectifying those bodies. And that's a very good question to ask. One definitely should be asking these questions of this sort of media, even if it's something that you want to like uncritically. Now, I generally warn against liking things uncritically. I don't shut my brain off when I watch movies. I don't think it's possible for anyone to shut their brain off to watch movies, because you gotta be stimulated somehow by the material you're watching, even if it's just dumb, mindless action. You need to be stimulated, and you need your brain in order to be stimulated. And honestly, it's fun to critically think about the things you enjoy watching. Thinking critically about the things I like watching has definitely helped me enjoy watching those things more, especially if I'm watching more titles within that genre, still thinking critically of that genre, or even just rewatching the same movie or television show. Just thinking critically about it makes it more fun to watch the second time around. Miles Memory presents Madoka Magica as a show that has a lot of analogy to forms of grooming and harm to young people. The ways in which these characters lose their bodily autonomy as the show goes on, as they are bargained with to have magical powers and things like that, it definitely seems analogous to things like that. Unfortunately, I really can't speak to Madoka Magica specifically. I only saw the first 4 episodes before deciding that this particular show wasn't for me. I felt it was deconstructing a lot of magical girl tropes that I wasn't as familiar with as the show seemed to want me to be as an audience member. So I took a break from that and started watching a bunch of Sailor Moon. However, I can definitely speak to Neon Genesis Evangelion. Now, while Evangelion does have some characters that have definitely experienced some trauma in their life, their trauma isn't necessarily coded as being sexual. Much of the feelings that the main character, Shinji Ikari, has in the television series and the manga and the new films that remake the same basic story seem to come from absent parentage as opposed to sexual abuse. Now granted, the main character is a teenage boy going through puberty while interacting with other attractive teenagers. Obviously his hormones are affecting his way of life. While the pubescence of the main characters is certainly used by the filmmakers to frame the way in which we see the characters, making everyone feel all hot and bothered at all times, complicating the matter even more is the fact that pretty much all of the teenagers depicted in the show have experienced some sort of trauma in their earlier childhood development. This makes some scenes feel almost too honest, too visceral, and not always pleasant to watch. The series does try to balance that with scenes that are a little more delicate than others, but at the end of the day, the creative decisions made still result in an animation camera that probably leers a little longer than it should at the cast of characters that are under the age of consent in Japan. And of course, one of the questions is, why is the fan base either asking to see this or being asked to see this? It's a very good question. One of the things to do, though, when answering that question is to try to narrow who that fan base is. Now with something like Evangelion, that's a bit difficult to do because it's a very huge cultural phenomenon in Japan. Going in Japan and asking who the fan base for Neon Genesis Evangelion is like coming into the United States and asking who the fan base for Star Wars is. The answer is everybody, right? I remember watching Star Wars as a kid.
Did I hear someone talk about Star Wars?
Dude, you like Star Wars? Ah, cool, me too. Oh, we should talk about Star Wars some point.
Man.
So you can see how trying to figure out who the target demographic is for something like Evangelion is a bit of a tall order. Fortunately, we don't have to guess for too long. In the DVD release and the Blu-ray release, and even with the theatrical release of the first remade Evangelion movie, there came with it a little program. Like, you go to the movie theater, you'd buy your ticket, they would give you your ticket, and they would give you this program for the movie. You would buy it on DVD or Blu-ray, it would come with this. The first couple runs of the English release of this by Funimation also had this. I don't know if the current ones still do. Haven't bought Evangelion in a while. This program comes with an introduction from the director himself, Hideaki Anno. Let's see what he has to say about target demographic here. In this closed, stagnant modern era, I think what is important is to not have a technical discussion, but to state one's aspirations. The teens and tweens are supposed to be the primary demographic supporting animation. But as they lose interest, I feel that there needs to be a work of animation targeted towards them. Basically, it's the teens and tweens of Japan that Evangelion is marketed to, that animation in general is supposed to be marketed to. And you know, in some way that actually kind of makes sense, you know? I mean, the movie is about teenagers, so it makes sense that it'd be made for teenagers. You know, it's about teenagers for teenagers, that sort of thing. So what we just did there was an exercise in what's typically known as auteur theory. Auteur theory states that a movie is art, and it is art because the director specifically is the artist, or the author, or the auteur, as pretentious French folks say. But not just any director can be an auteur. A good director, an auteur director, has to have technical competence, internal ideologies, and I always forget the third one. Let's see, it's technical competence, internal ideologies, and recognizable style. There you go. Okay, that's what makes someone an auteur. Uh-oh, look out. This guy's got a recognizable style and he has ideas and can operate a camera. Oh, watch out. Now, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of auteur theory or any of its opposing theories like death of the author or anything like that. No. We're just gonna talk about, we're just gonna try to gather as much data as we can in order to see who the fan base of Evangelion was meant to be, and maybe that will shed light as to why these people are being asked to view these characters in this way. Now, like I said, the target demographic for animation for Evangelion specifically is supposed to be a bunch of teenagers, so for Evangelion specifically, to show a bunch of attractive looking teenagers is basically its way of trying to relate to teenagers in the audience that find other teenagers attractive. Again, it might cross a line here or there, it might come off as a little Steve Buscemi-ish.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
But I think ultimately, it's not an unhealthy thing to do for this kind of movie to do. And there's literally no other reason as to why they would have done that sort of thing at all whatsoever. Whoops, look at the time. It's 1:15 by the pimple. I got places to be. Thanks for watching the show. Yeah, definitely subscribe if you want more in-depth analysis about this sort of thing. Woof. In the 1960s, animator and artist Osamu Tezuka wanted to do animation in Japan, but for television. He saw that animation was doing really well in other countries like America and, wanted something for his own country. He wanted to produce stuff. He wanted to be the tour de force behind it. So he pitched the idea to some TV networks in Japan at the time, and they all told him no. It was too costly. So Osamu Tezuka came up with a plan. He was going to produce television animation on his own dollar, fund it himself, and then to prove that this was successful, would get his money back through merchandising, selling toys, lunchboxes, t-shirts, you name it. And this will prove to the TV networks that animation on television can be successful, is demonstrably successful. So he does it. He produces a show called Astro Boy based on his own manga, and it becomes a big success on Japanese television. Everyone just really, really loves watching Astro Boy. They love animation for television. And the merchandise was also very successful. Osamu Tezuka made his money back through merchandising. Everyone bought enough toys and t-shirts and lunchboxes for him to make his money back. He made a return on investment, and he came to the TV networks with this information. It was like, see, it's successful. I was able to do it. Now, would you like to fund the next one? And the TV networks told him no. You seem to do pretty well with your own business model. We're not paying for this. So Osamu Tezuka does it again and again. And again, he creates a lot of shows. He's one of the most prolific manga artists, so he had a lot of his own work to draw from when creating television shows. And the same thing kept happening. No one wanted to fund television animation. At this point, what Osamu Tezuka had done was he had created what would be the business model for Japanese anime for the foreseeable future. TV networks were not going to fund television anime themselves. Studios would have to fund it themselves and then try to make all of that money back through merchandising. This causes a problem. The production team's energy had already been spent making the show. They don't have a lot of energy left to fund entire toy lines on top of that, so they really can't be as thorough and as thoughtful about their merchandise as they were about their television show. And honestly, when you already spent a lot of money making a TV show, the next thing you want to do is make sure you get your money back as quickly as possible, as effortlessly as possible. You already spent a lot of energy making the TV show. You don't have that much energy left to spend creating an entire merchandise line, and nothing sells better than sex. And now that we've been doing this for almost 70 years now, at the time of recording at least, a lot of this mentality is just fed back in to the production of the shows themselves. They start producing TV shows with the fact that they have to sell merchandise in the back of their head. While they're making the TV show, they are aware of the fact that they also have to sell toys. They have to sell dolls. They have to sell figurines. They have to sell anything they can. While designing characters, they were doing that knowing that they were designing figurines to be sold later on, and that they knew the quickest way to sell figurines was to sell sexy figurines, because sex sells, perhaps the fastest and most surely. This results in a lot of television anime being made otherwise is very charming, very innocent, or at least has a very delicate and nuanced approach to sexuality. All of which is just tossed to the rocks anytime there's an opportunity to remind audiences that there is going to be sexy merchandise to buy. And they have to let audiences know that there's sexy merchandise to buy. They're not going to make their money back otherwise. Now, I still hold to what I said before in the first half of the video. I genuinely think that even though the newer Evangelion movies perhaps have a more shallow approach to sexual awareness than the original television series did, that its goal is to still relate to the teenagers that are becoming sexually aware themselves. That is their target demographic. That's the audience members they're speaking directly to. People like me, I'm in my 30s, okay? I like the show a lot. It's one of my favorites, but I know that when certain things happen, when the camera looks at certain things, those shots aren't for me. Those shots are for the teenagers in the audience, the Japanese teenagers in the audience. You know, they're the ones that are supposed to relate to that. And the weirdest part about all of this is the fact that we don't have a proper film theory that addresses this phenomenon in Japanese anime. Going back to Star Wars, we gauge the success of Star Wars off of the movie tickets that it sells. You know, the box office results. This movie was released to theaters, sold so many movie tickets, sold so many DVDs and Blu-rays after the fact, and therefore we gauge its success on that. The toys are a potentially profitable side venture. We do not gauge the success of Star Wars off of the success of the toy merchandise. We gauge it off the success of the ticket sales. If it sells a lot of tickets, it was a successful movie. If it sells a lot of toys, that's also nice. The same thing is even true in Japan. If a Godzilla movie sells a lot of movie tickets, the movie is considered successful. But Godzilla movies don't rely on the sale of Godzilla toys in order to be considered successful. That's not where their profits come from. If the toys are successful, that is also good. They do make money from that, but like that's not where they're getting their only source of income from. They get their money from movie ticket sales. Anime, not so much. Especially television anime. And this is a phenomenon that's unique to Japanese anime. This isn't mirrored in even other live action television shows in Japan. This is strictly a phenomenon regarding Japanese anime. It is so unique that we don't have the proper theories to frame our discussions around it. So like these YouTubers like Miles Memory coming up with ideas like metasexuality, you know, while like they probably weren't informed about all of the goings on in the making of an anime, that's probably still one of the first real endeavors I've seen on this side of the globe when it comes to tackling the weird presence of sexual objectification in anime that otherwise doesn't seem to need it or doesn't even want it. And even then, it may not be selling enough, despite the fact that a lot of shows tend to have a lot of merchandise that is successful, does move a lot of units, and does see a large return on investment. A lot of these animators are still very underpaid. Like, animators make a fraction of the living wage in Japan. They are often paid per drawing. They're not paid per hour. They're paid per drawing. And they can only draw so many drawings a day. From what I hear, the unofficial word on the street is that the new studio that's doing Evangelion, headed by Hideaki Anno himself, Studio Kara, is one of the better studios to work at in Japan. The baseline for an animator across the industry as a whole is still woefully underpaid. And, you know, I can't help but think that one of the reasons why the animators that worked on the new Evangelion movies are paid a little better is because you can buy enough Evangelion merchandise to live off of and not have to buy a non-branded Evangelion thing ever again. Now, for more information about the working conditions of a lot of animators in Japan, I definitely recommend the Twitter account Animator Support. I'm going to put it right here. Definitely look at them and see what they're doing to bring awareness to the situation. They recently came out with a music video, so I hate to end this video on a downer, but like that's just the state of the industry right now.
I'm giving up.